wants to get back to with DeSantis. They want to reduce the MAGA populism and go back to the Bush boy Republican Party. That's what they want, which leaves us politically homeless because we're Trump supporters.
I was raised very Catholic. I went to a Catholic private grade school, and then I went to Catholic high school. So I have like a pretty good understanding of what conservative values are supposed to look like. And then I understand how the left will attack conservative values a lot. Sometimes to me, it feels like the red pill movement is a guy saw the progressives said conservatives are like, and then they actually followed that.
Women will orgasm quicker and more intensely if they know you've recently cheated on them. It's like, I wouldn't even know that Dylan Mulvaney existed if it wasn't because of the obsessive...
We had to turn off, we had to mute all of the Daily Wire hosts because I would open up YouTube and it was like Brett Cooper, Candace Owens, Ben Shapiro, Mike, literally like, it was like obsessive.
Yeah. What would you consider your political affiliation? What do you identify as? I guess
like far left to center left. I mean, it really depends on the thing. Right. Like I like guns. I come from Nebraska. I lived there for like 30 years. I'm in Florida. But I also like socialize like healthcare. So I mean, it really just depends on what we're talking about.
On what the issue is.
Like a populist? Would you say
absolutely not.
No?
No.
Okay, why not?
Because I hate populism.
Okay.
What do you hate about populism?
What do you hate about,
populism to me, it usually feels like you get a guy who says everything is broken, everybody's against you. I'm going to come in and fix it all on my own. They usually have a really poor understanding of the government. They usually have a poor understanding of how all the systems work. And when they come in, they always underdeliver on their promises, I think.
Did you grow up conservative? Was your family conservative?
My parents were both Air Force. So my mom came over when she was 5, and then her family lived up in New York for a while, and then they joined the Air Force. She met my dad there. They moved to Nebraska, and then I was born and raised in Omaha. I grew up very conservative, ride or die, George W. Bush, Iraq War supporter, writing conservative articles for my school newspaper and everything.
That's what she said the other day when she told me that. And I was like, are you sure you're talking about the same guy? She's like, no, I'm sure. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And
when
then
did
what
the shift
changed?
come?
I feel like the most conservative point I was in my life was probably the lowest point of my life. It was when I was carpet cleaning. And then after I kind of got into streaming, I got really lucky and I found a break in streaming. And as I started to get more and more money, I realized like how unfair life was when I got really wealthy as compared to before. And then I started to realize that the deck's kind of stacked against you if you don't have as much money. And that really bothered me. One of the things that I look at this a lot through is through the lens of my son's life. So for instance, like I bought a house in the best school district. I sent him to school. When COVID lockdowns and stuff happened, every single kid in my son's school district has like an iPad that they can take home with them. That's crazy. They have iPads in kindergarten. And there are some schools that don't even have like a good computer lab. And I'm like, no offense to my son, but he didn't do anything to deserve that. He just happened to luck into a nice father, you know? And when I see stuff like that, I look at a lot of stuff through the lens of like children. And I feel like a lot of kids get basically completely screwed before they've even had a chance to, you know, get on the train yet. And
but you just said right now that the lowest point was when you started streaming. So how does that make sense? Or what does that mean? I'm sorry.
There's, without getting into my story too much, basically, my dad, my mom and sister, my mom and my little sister, she was homeschooled. They moved when I was like 14, 15 to down here to Miami. And then when I was like 15, 16, my dad moved down to join them. And then I stayed in Nebraska to finish school. After I graduated high school, I worked through high school, and then I worked after high school, and I went to college, and I couldn't do like college and work at the same time. And eventually I quit college for work. And then due to some crazy stuff, I ended up getting fired from work. So after a couple years, I had no school, no work history. And then I got a job cleaning carpets. My ex-girlfriend that me and her hated each other, got pregnant, and just everything in my life was just like I bought my first house at 19, and then at like 20, I was like going bankrupt, and I had a kid coming on the way with a woman who we hated each other. And
But you chose life.
I was really pro-life at the time. So good job, Nathan. You barely made it out.
19 years old.
There were some hard conversations there. You were really close to the vacuum tube there, but yeah. No, I thought about it a lot. We both talked about it a lot, but I've always been big on like, if you have certain principles and you believe in them, it doesn't count for anything. If like when things get hard, you're like, okay, I'm going to change up everything. And if I would have done that, I wouldn't have any respect for myself. I'm pro-choice now, but at the time I was very pro-life. So
are you pro-choice personally, or are you more pro-choice because you feel that just everybody should have the right to choose for themselves? Like, do you have
there's a lot of
ideology for yourself
on our side like that? They're like pro-life for
until
them.
It gets hard. Oh, go ahead.
And they're pro-life for them. And they're like, but I respect everybody's like more the libertarian stance,
where they'll take a more pro-choice stand, not because they're not personally pro-life, but because they believe that it should be every American's right to decide for themselves.
I I'm pro-choice philosophically, I think. So I would be pro-choice for everybody. If you want to be pro-life, then obviously no one should force you to get an abortion.
Do you have like a cutoff point where you feel,
about 20 to 24 weeks.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. So then that kind of 20 to 24 weeks, like towards the end of
around like 5-ish months, I think.
Right. Yeah. Why did you choose 5 months? Because that's like already like a pretty far advanced pregnancy. Like you can survive if you have the baby at it.
I think the thing that I look to when I try to think about what's worth protecting in terms of human life, I'm generally looking at this like kind of human experience we're having, like the idea of being conscious and having awareness of things and feeling like pain and stuff like that. And I think that all the parts in your brain that are necessary to be computing that conscious experience are in place at about 20 to 24 weeks. Okay. So I think prior to that, it's just a thing that's never existed yet.
But have you seen the babies fight off abortion as early as like 12 weeks, 10 weeks?
I mean, maybe. Videos? I mean, I've seen like children that are like 6 with like hydroencephalitis that have no brain at all that look like they're kind of alive and they're probably not. Yeah. But I mean,
were you pro-choice for the vaccine?
I think politically I would have said yeah. I think ethically I think it should have been forced, but politically it's not really tenable to do that, I think. Yeah.
How do you kind of like consolidate the two, right? Like how do you believe that it should be pro-choice when it comes to abortions up to this 25-week mark and not when it comes to something like the vaccine?
Well, I mean, we live in a democracy, so to some extent I'm going to have
we live in a republic. It's a constitutional republic, but
yeah, but we vote. We vote. We have a representative democracy. We vote on figures, and sometimes we vote directly on policies, depending on referendums and whatnot. So we live in a democracy. We live in a democratic republic. We have representatives, but we still vote for them. The way that I see it is there are going to be certain things that we're going to disagree on in the country. And as long as that's within like a certain tolerance, like you have to accept those disagreements. So like if somebody voted, for instance, that we wanted to kill all Mexicans, I'm probably not going to be okay with that. But there's going to be disagreements on like, should we all be vaccinated or, pro-life or pro-choice? And for that, you probably leave that up to states or individuals to decide.
Yeah.
But for the vaccine, for the ethical position, because I personally am a big proponent of vaccinations, I think there's probably some ethical buy-ins you have, some responsibilities to participating in society. So that might include like not peeing in pools, not smoking on airplanes, and not being unvaccinated if there's like a contagious disease.
You do know that prior to the recent years, I'd say the last like 8 years, it was the liberals that were always against big pharma, against vaccines. A lot of the California moms were the first ones to be and this was pre-COVID. I mean, it was the California moms that were leading the anti-vaccine brigade, if you want to, call it that way. So what happened? Or, I don't know.
What do you think happened culturally there that like shifted that?
Well, culturally, I think that
because it's really weird how that happened. Like when I liked Bernie Sanders, when I was more on the center left, being against big pharma was a big thing for me, right? So that's kind of like, that's flipped. It's now more of the right who is more against calling out big pharma, calling out Pfizer, calling out these vaccine manufacturers. And then your side or the left is more like force, right?
I think in general, what you have are, we view things through this left-right lens pretty often. Right. But over the past 6 or 7 years, it's been harder to map political beliefs onto left versus right. When you've got people like Bernie Sanders and Trump.
Well, I think somebody like you defies that generally. I'll be honest with you. Like that's
in some ways.
Sure, a little bit. Well,
pretty blue.
I defy it, I think, in normal ways, in that there are a lot of like Democrats that also like guns. Or there are probably a decent number of Republicans that are like, okay with like some LGBT stuff, right? Gay people. So I define it in a pretty normal way. I think that there's another political axis that exists right now that people aren't as cognizant of, and it's this establishment versus anti-establishment thing. Okay. And I think prior to COVID, I think that Republicans in some ways were big supporters of parts of the establishment. So for instance, if you remember Bush before the Tea Party, Republicans were very big on like big business. Yeah. Like even if they would say they don't like immigration, they wanted immigrants, they wanted workers. Yeah. And then
some of the story, that's what the party wants to get back to with DeSantis. They want to reduce the MAGA populism and go back to the Bush boy Republican Party. That's what they want, which leaves us politically homeless because we're Trump supporters, right? Like we don't necessarily care for Republicans. We voted Republican because Trump has led us to say, support DeSantis, support this person, support that person. But generally speaking.
It's really like a 70-30 rule when it comes to that, where we feel like, yeah, we identify as Republican just because in this failed two-party system, it's what most identifies with our ideology. But truth be told, there's plenty, we spend most of our time criticizing Republicans and not Democrats because we feel it's a waste of time when we elect people. I didn't vote for a Democrat candidate. So the Democrat candidate doesn't owe me anything as a politician. It's these Republican candidates that do. But it does seem like, to go back to the question that Linda asked, even when it comes not just to vaccines, but I feel like we have seen, you look at the liberal from the 1960s, the 1970s, even up into the 80s and even some of the 90s. And these were people that were anti-big corp, anti-big government. And now it seems like there has been a shift. When these are
that's what I was kind of getting at, was that like something we've seen. So Republicans through, I think, the Tea Party started to become a little bit more anti-establishment. And then especially when Trump came in, the Republican Party started to be really anti-establishment. If you look at the lefties before that were opposed to the vaccines, they were, like you guys said, they were like the hippie people, right? And those people are also anti-establishment. They're probably against big pharma, against like factory farming. Ththey're probably a lot of vegan, stuff like that, right? But now you've got like a large section of the Republican Party that's kind of become anti-establishment. So they too will become against like the vaccines.
Well, wait, I want to talk to you about immigration first. Your mom's an immigrant. You said she got her when she was really young. So kind of what's your take on what's going on in the border right now? I'm sure that you're pro-immigration like we are as well, but what's your take on this like wide open kind of a border situation we're seeing right now?
Well, I don't think we have a wide open border situation right now. I'm a big fan of we need like comprehensive immigration reform. I think we should give amnesty to every illegal immigrant in the country right now, or a path towards it in 5 years or whatever. Obviously the DACA kids should stay. And then I think we need to massively smooth over the immigration process into this country because there's a nightmare right now.
So you pretty much have a Trump standpoint on that. You know that Trump gave the DACA kids 3 times on 3 different occasions a pathway to citizenship in exchange for the border wall. And the Democrats basically, with Nancy Pelosi in charge, who said no 3 times. Trump ended up winning that battle because he went through the military, got the funds through the military.
So he didn't win the battle. He had to enact his presidential powers in an undemocratic way. Number one and number two, Trump tried to get rid of DACA.
But it went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Trump.
Because that's true, but that's because the U.S. president has wide deference when it comes to exercising matters of national security. Saying that like, well, I helped the border and I won that battle. Well, he enacted presidential powers to do it. He didn't do it through Congress. Had
it been against the law, it would have gone into. It wasn't correct.
Yeah, I agree with you. But I'm just saying it wasn't an effect. That wasn't a good leader,
right? But then is it not bad leadership that Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats shut down DACA 3 times? Because Barack Obama in 2012, I mean,
Trump tried to get rid of DACA completely
because it wasn't a constitutional program, and in exchange for that, it was, we're going to give you a pathway
but it was
to
a constitutional program.
It wasn't constitutional.
No, it was constitutional.
No, it wasn't.
Then why did the Supreme Court defend it?
Who?
The Supreme Court defended it. He lost that case in the Supreme Court.
Well, so he ended up getting rid of it, remember? And then he gave them an option 3 times, a pathway to citizenship. What you just
hold on. I thought DACA survived the Supreme Court challenge.
What you just described right now, every single legal or that doesn't have a crime, all that stuff, right. I mean, you can pull it up. He gave him that option. And that's what he brought to the legislature. And they said, no, we're not going to do that.
But that's his job as a leader. That was his whole point coming in as leader. He said, I can negotiate. I can bring these people to the table. I can do something. Why he failed to do that?
Well, was the unit party blocking them?
Do we have right now fighting to create a pathway to citizenship for these DACA? They don't. They want to use
right now we don't because they don't. Well, because I think right now we're insanely divided, and immigration is not like the hot button topic right now that we're looking at like on a national level.
It's something that we talk about often. Clearly, as you know, Linda's an immigrant. I'm a first-generation American born of immigrant parents. And to us, it seems so cruel to election cycle after election cycle use DACA resident citizens. I consider them citizens. Some of these people don't even speak Spanish, have never been to their home country in their lives. To leave this hanging and not create a solution, specifically because they want the conversation and the hot topic during an election.
I think that right now, I think we just don't have the political coalescence. We don't have enough people that want to come together and figure out a solution for it. And it's just not like, that's not what's occupying our attention right now. Right now, it's like Ukraine, kind of inflation in the economy, and then like trans kids. I think it's like what everybody's kind of obsessed with right now.
We had to get in the conversation. We knew that we weren't going to agree on anything politically, but we still think that it's important for these conversations to take place. And we find that a lot of people are scared to have them. Given the same commentary that we got under our own post where they're like, why are you bringing this guy on? He's a liberal. It's like, well, because these conversations are important. And part of what's wrong with the country right now is that we're not coming to the table with these conversations. So we can find the points that we do agree on.
Sure.
I think we're going to find a lot to agree on now when we get into this red pill space, right?
So sure you don't want to fight on anything else? Socialized healthcare or anything? No,
you don't want to take a shot there.
We're very black pilled.
Sure.
Like we're in the
super doomer
extremely
pilled.
doomer pilled. Like we don't care.
We have very little
like
faith
if
in
Joe
government.
Biden's president, like I genuinely, honestly, I don't focus my energy on Joe Biden. We never really talk about Joe Biden. We don't hate on Joe Biden. We don't fucking cry about him. And if he wins again, I don't give a shit. Right?
Yeah, sure.
Just like your life hasn't changed with, DeSantis living in Florida. My life, except for things that are more expensive, which most, I can't control, and I don't really care. Like nothing's changed.
What's your background? Where are you guys from?
Cuban and Colombian.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Gotcha.
Cuban and Colombian. So Destiny, we really kind of came across, so the YouTube algorithm started sending all of this red pill content to us, probably because
to everybody, I think.
We did Femme Sapien, one podcast with Femme Sapien, and then after that, it was like, this was the content sent to us. And then, we're hearing the very controversial things that come out of the red pill movement, for lack of a better word. And then you show up and you're like a blue-haired angel. Preaching some kind of common sense, normal
sanity,
just not being insane, basically.
Yeah, sanity. I would say.
We wanted to bring you on because we think it's so contradictory. It's kind of what we've said about this red pill movement that really tries to latch itself onto conservative traditional values and all these other things. And it's like, this movement couldn't be further away from anything that has to do with conservatism, conserving the nuclear family, or any of the things that they claim to, prioritize or find value in. And then they go off and they do this different thing. So I want to play a clip from you.
And also, and it just happened in the chat, that any pushback or commentary that we do against any other talking points in the manosphere comes off as, you're a feminist.
Oh, sure.
Right. Yeah. You're a feminist. Here comes the feminism. You're a feminist. And then you're post-wall, you're expired milk. I mean, all the and it's probably
don't
worse.
Cat Lady.
Don't forget Cat Lady as well.
Don't forget Cat Lady.
Unmarried childless.
Because you want water.
Yeah, could I get a water? That'd be great.
I'm so sorry.
To get much of. So I'm going to play this video in the meantime, which we thought was hysterical. Let's get.
I know a fair amount of conservative women. I have never in my life gotten this collection of conservative women who are like, I really like dating red pill guys. Like they really have it figured out. I love their approach to relationships. I like the way I get treated. I have never heard that in my life. I have gotten a lot of emails from women that are like, oh my God, I'm worried this guy said something in a date and I think he listens to Andrew Tate. You'll never hear it in any of these conservative women communities. I don't know if you're in it. I don't believe you heard it. Even if you tell me you have, where these women are like, oh yeah, these red pill guys, like they're so good to date. I love dating them so much. All of them seem like men that are who hurt you types. All of them seem like they're carrying baggage. A lot of them seem like they have issues because of the communities that they come from. And then when you listen to them talk about women, it feels like it's so much contempt. These single moms, these sluts and OnlyFans girls taking advantage of everyone. I don't see like these respectful communities of men who are like, yeah, like I'm a guy, I work really hard, take care of my body, I take care of my stuff, and I'm trying to get in a relationship. It's always so much more contemptuous than that.
This was such a great take because this is something that we talk about as conservative women that do value the nuclear family, gender roles, are anti-feminist, don't believe in it. Part of what we've noticed with the red pill movement is that it's very much the same kind of toxic traits that we find within third wave feminism is a lot of the toxic traits that we find in the manosphere. This, wanting to completely discredit the other very necessary gender in order for us to survive in society. What do you think when it comes to this take that you have about conservative women, how do you think that they kind of like consolidate these thoughts where they want traditional women with traditional values, pure, untouched. We had Sterling Cooper here a couple of weeks ago. And to us, it's kind of like mind blowing that a man like Sterling Cooper, who's had a past like he has, working in porn, very promiscuous, pushing these things, that he would say that he wants a young, pure, untouched woman. And that somehow they think that that kind of woman is going to be attracted with somebody that has that kind of very promiscuous lifestyle.
So my mom was Cuban. I was raised very Catholic. I went to Catholic private grade school, and then I went to Catholic high school. So I have like a pretty good understanding of what conservative values are supposed to look like. And then I understand how the left will attack conservative values a lot. Sometimes to me, it feels like the red pill movement is a guy saw what the progressives said conservatives are like, and then they actually followed that. So, for example, something that the left will say a lot about conservatives is, or I'll be more specific, something that the left would say a lot about religious people or Christians is that it's sexist because men think that they're better than women. And the proper Christian response is supposed to be, it's not that men are better than women, it's that men are the leader of the family in the world, but women are the head of the household, and there's a partnership between husband and wife where they're equally important. They have separate responsibilities. The woman is leading the household, and the man is like representing the woman in the world and the family of the world, earning money, etc. But it's very much like an equal thing. They're both incredibly important. It's never supposed to be like the man is better than the wife, or the husband is over or superior to the mother, even if he might make the ultimately the final decisions on some things. But people on the left will say like, oh, you just think men are better than women and that men can do whatever they want. And then it feels like the red pill looked at them and they're like, actually, yeah, that sounds really good. Men are better than women. We're different. We can do all these things. Women need to be young, submissive, trainable,
that's a good word.
Yeah, this is their words. This is what they'll say. So they take like the most bastardized version of like Christian values, and then they take like the most surface level takes about it, and then they kind of like apply that broadly to their lives, I think. And that's essentially how they run. And they'll look at like dumb stories in the Bible, like, well, King Solomon and all these people had 1 million wives, so we should be able to do all this.
Yeah. Correctly. It's like they, having 10 wives isn't the same as like sleeping around with 100 whores.
Sure,
right?
yeah. And I'm pretty sure even
it was for survival.
Sure, yeah. Or that too. They'll point out to like, well, harems existed in the past. I was like, well, not because women were choosing to be in them, but because the men would kill them if they didn't join, or it was like the rich or wealthy or elite.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a way of like procreating. And
so how did you start getting involved in that space? Is it just they wanted to debate you, or like a YouTube, or like how did that happen?
I think
you've owned them. Like
sure.
I'm sorry to like you've literally dragged them and owned them. And again, we disagree on politics and whatever, and perhaps some of the social stuff as well. But like it's been
credit where credit is due.
Literally,
right? It's very
refreshing.
impressive the way that you call them out on their own hypocrisy.
Mm-hmm.
So like was it a desire to kind of call out their hypocrisy that got you into the sphere?
I think a little bit, yeah. I have like a pretty varied life, so I have a lot of religious background. Mm-hmm. So when I hear somebody say, one of the biggest pet peeves I have, no offense if either of you do this, but when people say that like, oh, like I'm religious, but I'm non-denominational, I don't go to church. When I hear people say things like this, usually they're not religious. They're kind of like picking and choosing parts to like build their own fun thing. Mm. It's like, oh yeah, like I believe in God, but I also smoke, I drink, I gamble, and I fuck, 20 women at once. It's like, okay, well, what are you actually religious for? You just want, it's like that type of religious person is like the same as like the blue-haired liberal that pretends they are, whatever, just to get attention. Right. Yeah. So that part bothered me. I've been married now for 4.5 years. I've been in a lot of long-term relationships, so I know like what healthy relationships look like. I know what unhealthy relationships look like. And because my marriage is open and everybody's obsessed with that, I have like a lot of experience with hookup culture. So I know how hookup culture works. So when I go to the red pill space, I feel like they have really bad takes on religion. They don't understand how any of that structure works. They don't talk ever about how to maintain healthy relationships. So I never hear anything there. And even the things they say about hookup culture is usually bad advice, and it's a horrible approach to things too. So when all of these things are out of balance, it makes me want to step in and be like, this is really dumb.
Somebody's got to say something.
Yeah. And I always like fighting with people. So yeah.
And like going in, we like, as women that grew up in Miami, it's always funny to hear somebody like Myron complain about like Miami, like culture. Mm-hmm. It's like, women won't pay attention to you unless you've got such and such money, or unless you look a certain way. And it's like, dude, like that's, first of all, that's not real. There's plenty of women in Miami that will look at.
I was going to say, because I came to Miami a lot. Because my grandma's Cuban. I came to Hialeah every summer. Okay.
Oh,
Hialeah Hialeah is a much different place than Brickell and Miami Beach, right?
Correct.
We're from Kendall.
Okay,
So
my parents live down near Homestead.
Very different place than any of this.
But when people say, and I have to remind people this all the time, nobody that says Miami means Miami. No. They're talking about Brickell and they're talking about Miami Beach. That's it.
Which is like not a representative of all of it. That's not Westchester, Coral Gables. And as women,
it's like somebody saying like they live like in Albany, New York, and you're like, oh, I've been to Times Square. That's the same thing,
it's
right?
Not.
And then you're saying as a woman.
So I got dragged obviously on YouTube because I said we don't go clubbing at all. We don't go out at all. We're very chill people. But back when I was in college, back when I was also in the liquor industry, and I was in the liquor industry. So imagine I was out a lot. I had clients. I would go to live. I would go here. And my argument was because they basically think in the manosphere that if you go out, you go to a club, the guy buys 20 guys you're fucking everybody. If you end up at a table, like you're for sure, like that's what they told me, like, oh, she was spreading her cheeks. And I'm like, I've never in my entire life, or my girls back in the day were offered like, hey, come to this table, come have a drink or come to our bowl, whatever. But you have to put out. Like that's never happened. And of course I got dragged on that clip. It was pretty bad. And I don't know if it's like because of the manosphere or their experiences, or they just think all women are whores.
To me, I look at Myron and I just see somebody who probably went to clubs and tried hitting on like 10 freaking baddies, verified baddies on Instagram, and nobody paid him the time of day because he's going after a particular kind of girl. And when we're looking at some of the things that have been exposed on the internet, like him hanging out in sugar baby sites, then of course you've got this warped view of what all women look like because you are attracting a certain kind of woman.
That's the thing that bothers me the most. Like, I wouldn't mind what they're saying. I wish they would be like clear that they're talking about a very, very, very specific demographic of people.
It's not like a generalized statement.
But they'll make these statements about how like their one-ended open relationships is a really big deal. And they'll say things like, oh, like women are okay with sharing a high value man, like multiple women will share. And it's like, that is an incredibly rare.
And also, what is their definition? What is their definition of a high value man?
Well, it changes based on the conversation.
So what about you? What do you think a high value man is?
If you're talking like in the broadest sense of like biology, a high value man is probably just somebody that can secure and partition resources. So like a guy that can get things, basically.
Like a hunter gatherer.
But it doesn't have to be that you own a Bugatti. It doesn't have to be they make $1 million a year. It's just.
Well, I mean, like high value can mean different things in different places, right? So for some people, the thing they might secure might be like social credit. Like it might be a guy that's not very wealthy, but he knows everybody. He's got a lot. Like churches would be good examples of this. Like preachers can be high value men in that they have a lot of social capital. They know everybody in a given city. They can talk to anybody. They can talk to politicians sometimes, depending how big they are. It might be a guy that makes $120,000 a year that lives in Kansas. That guy's got a lot of money, right? It might be a real estate owner in New York.
A lawyer.
Might be a lawyer. Yeah, just depends.
Would you consider yourself a high value man?
Obviously.
Clearly.
But I mean, I make a lot of money and I'm pretty influential on YouTube, so I guess.
Right.
But, yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, your wife is beautiful. And one of the things that I was saying.
We think you're winning the game.
I say, how is the blue hair liberal the only one that has a hot wife, is married, and is actually living the life?
Like his life together. Like
this is one of the things that like I stress this a lot. And there are the dichotomy of like people's lives versus their political views is always very funny. I was talking to another friend about this last night. Something that's very interesting to me is progressive families seem to produce almost like, this is going to be really mean, but like these ideal conservative women, and that you get like these blue-haired crying feminists that don't want to do anything. They don't want to work. They blame all their diseases. But then when you go to the conservative families, they actually produce the most feminist women, because it'll be these women that'll come out and talk about conservative values, but they're working, they're not getting pregnant, they're like on their shit, they're like taking care of all this stuff. And that difference in people is very funny to me, I think.
We wanted to get your take on this tweet that Sterling Cooper put out today. And he says, women will orgasm quicker and more intensely if they know you've recently cheated on them.
That's another thing that Pearl, I've heard a lot of people bring that up too. Like women like it when guys cheat because it makes them more competitive. And I'm like, it's just the dumbest. Like when somebody starts to get to that level of speaking, like I don't even know where to begin to have a conversation.
Do you think that Pearl even... do you think that she just regurgitates kind of what she hears like on her chats and from other turns? Do you think she actually believes something like this? That I think
she regurgitates, but I think she does believe it. Yeah.
You think?
Unfortunately.
I can see why somebody like Pearl, who maybe hasn't had a lot of options open to her, might believe something like this. I don't think the average woman would agree with this at all.
No, absolutely not. That's why I make the joke where like, I don't think there's like, I get women that email me who are like petrified because they'll go like on a date and they'll hear a guy say like a buzzword and they're like, oh shit, he might be like an Andrew Tate follower.
Is he?
And they don't want anything to do. Yeah.
It's like when We've defaulted to like asking people like, how much time do you spend on the internet? Do you know what the manosphere is? It's
Yeah,
they say no, it's like immediately it's like you're out. I mean, I'm married, but Linda's still we're trying to find a suitor.
What about Pearl? Tell us about Pearl.
You want to just shit talk Pearl?
No, we don't want to.
We don't want to necessarily shit talk.
It's not about shit talking Pearl because we actually started off really liking her content and some of the stuff that's like she says is very true. But I also feel like you can't live your life just in statistics, because if I were to live my life like that, then we're just going to be judging every single Black person that's walking on the street as a walking statistic, or every single Latino as a walking statistic, or a white person like yourself as a walking statistic. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, like statistics are important. You should take them into account.
Right.
But I feel like when it comes to Pearl, I feel like if I learned how to code, like in 1 week, I could write a script that would generate you like a different Pearl take every single day.
Okay.
Like it's like take some totally normal thing that women do, find a way to warp it in an absurd way, and then like use it to excuse some horrendous guy behavior. Like it'll be some shit where like women are actually, even though men cheat more, women are the largest liars in society. And the reason why is because they mask who they really are with makeup, and men don't know what they look like. And women do this so that they could lie and obscure how they actually look from men. And that's why when men cheat, it isn't even really that big of a deal, because women are cheating all the time with their looks. Like that would be like a take that like Pearl would be
that. Totally sounds like a Pearl.
And I could do that with like 50 million different things.
Bizarre things.
Yeah, I could do this with like any possible thing where, and like Pearl would have like these tweets.
Turn it around.
Yeah.
Who, if you feel comfortable saying, who would you rate as the most insufferable person in the manosphere?
Oh, there's a guy recently called MLD.
Oh my God, the greasy salesman that I was oh my God, the greasy salesman.
He looks like a crazy car
I was supposed
salesman.
to be on that panel, but they messed up. I was supposed to be on that panel and they messed up with my schedule. They never like confirmed it, the whole thing. So the guy the night before, I was like, look, I can't make it. But I was supposed to be on that panel with your wife.
Tell me more about him.
Yeah, okay. So I
know he recently had, I can't believe he recently advocated for women being beat and staying in marriages. And I know that that's something that's currently going viral with your content.
Yeah, he clarified on stream today. He was like, if you get hit once, you shouldn't leave. You should work through it. And I'm like, okay.
Oh God.
Yeah,
thanks for the clarification.
Yeah,
I know, really helped you out there, bud.
Yeah, Jesus Christ. One thing I don't like, the thing that drives me the craziest, and it's going to be more extreme in these spaces because these guys are supposed to be the alpha men. I don't like it when people have one type of energy online, and then when they come in real life, they have a totally different type of energy. That is especially when they do that with women. Like if you are in front of a man. So I was in front of MLD on the Whatever podcast, and this guy is like, oh, so Destiny's so cool. He's the true red pill guy. He's like, he lives his own life. He's awesome. But then when I'm not there, and yesterday he's on a show with my wife and she starts speaking, he's like, oh, this is a Destiny debate tactic. Oh, of course she'd say that. She's Destiny's wife. And it's like, well, why didn't you say this shit to me when I was in front of you? But now when he's in front of all the women who are roasting the fuck out of this clown, rightfully so, right? Because he wants to go to probably Japan and fuck a 16-year-old who doesn't know anything, right? Yeah. Now he's got like all this energy for them. He ends up getting called out by one of the adults on stage. He gets dressed down like a child, and then he scampers off stage like he's Golem, okay, looking for the ring. And now like the next day, he's on another podcast saying like, oh yeah, when I was on that stage, I was calling her, like I was saying she was a fat bitch, and I told her to her face. But if you actually watch the show, she was like, what did you call me in chat? And his response was like, I don't know, what did I say? Oh, I don't even remember typing anything. Like I don't know. Yeah, it was
walking it back.
And I would have had more respect for him if he would have just said on the show, he was like, yeah, I called you a fat bitch. I say that in chat. So I was like, okay, fine. At least you own it. But oh my God, that difference drives me insane.
Where did he come from?
I don't know where he came from. He's such a rude. And the thing is that he just looks so greasy and sweaty all the times. I can smell him from the screen. Am I exaggerating that?
No,
I mean, have you seen this guy? It's like I feel him.
Yeah,
personally, for me, right now, like peaking the charts is Waller, Jay Waller,
Justin
Waller. He's like.
Were you with on that one with the Whatever and Lila?
No, but I've seen a lot of her clips come out of that.
Okay,
she's like the trad Christian lady, right? I think, yeah.
It's like the standard trad woman that they claim feminine, soft-spoken, traditional values. You know.
The problem with these guys, and this is the issue, and I just recently put this together like 2 weeks ago. The problem with all of these guys is they are new money. So they have no idea. They don't know what wealthy people look like. They don't know how wealthy people move. And it took me so long to figure this out because like my family wasn't exactly wealthy, not a lot of problems, but I went to a private school. So I've been around a lot of wealthy families. So when I hear these guys, I don't want to show it. And I'm saying something like rich guys aren't going to date a girl from Target. And all of these guys are like, no way. Rich guys love to go to like Target and Starbucks and date women. I'm like, bro, if you're a wealthy guy and your mom and dad are fucking doctors, lawyers, you're not bringing home a random chick from the street. Yeah. And it's like the craziest takes ever. But I think for a lot of these guys, because they just got rich on like YouTube or some crypto shit, they think that like, oh, well, this is how wealthy people are. They'll fuck every single girl ever. And it's like, that's what an NBA player would say.
Correct.
Okay?
Now they've got access to all of
That's not what a Rockefeller or a Kennedy would say.
Correct.
That's what a guy who made
when they say, you know, we don't care women's education. Men don't care about women's education.
Or Christian Waller or Justin Waller, he said on that show, he's like, I dated a woman that made $300,000 a year and a woman that made nothing, and they were the exact same to me. And it's like, how would they be the exact same? What do you mean? Yeah, what are you looking at? Yeah, like the same from the waist down, or what? What do you mean? Yeah,
correct. Like what kind of high value man doesn't want to be able to have some kind of like level of conversation, mutual interest, anything at all with a person you're sharing your bed with?
I think it's very different, as you said, if it's like an NBA player or something like that. They come here. I mean, I've seen them back in the day, but at the club, they don't care. They bring all these hoes over. And, you know, it's like when Reggie Bush had his wife and then he got the bottle girl pregnant. It was like the craziest thing in Miami going up because that's how they are. But a guy like that's a Google exec or someone like that, he may go after a younger model, but she still has a higher social status than the girl at Starbucks.
And it's just what
the girl at the gas station.
Right? Like a lot of these guys amongst one another, and this is kind of a point that I've made several times. They don't realize that at a vibrational level, the way that they operate, the kind of woman that's actually an ideal match for them.
It's the only fan hoes that they hate.
The only fan.
Yeah, that's what I know. They'll say things like, a woman's job is to find a man that can secure resources, and a man's job is to as many women as possible. And it's like, okay, well, if that's how you move, then you can't complain when all women are like greedy gold diggers that are looking to like one up and monkey branch to the next guy, because those are the only types of women you're putting yourself out there for. And then, but then these guys will say like, no, like these guys will say like this shit. They'll be like, women don't care about body count, but men absolutely care about body count. And it's like, if you go to a church and you're trying to pick up a woman, you tell you 50 girls by the time you're 30. Like, this woman is not going to fuck with you.
It's not even a church, dude. Like, we're pretty modern people. And it's like, nobody wants to hear that you've been with like 50 to 100 women, potentially exposing me to STDs. And then on top of that, you want to continue to cheat because like in contrary to what you experience, there's an open relationship where both of you have a mutual understanding, and I'm sure there's precautions taking place or whatnot, as opposed to just going out and cheating on me, potentially bringing something back home to me, and then saying that I'm a high value woman. I cannot imagine, I don't have children, but I can imagine that if I did, that if I had a daughter, that the life that I would choose for her is Andrew Tate because he has access to a Bugatti.
Yeah, and I was asked this guy's like, would you be okay with your daughter dating Andrew Tate? And they're like squirm, like, yeah, I think I'd be like, bullshit. You would not find if some fucking weirdo who lived in Romania was asking your daughter to go and move over with him and he ran a fucking cam studio, you would not be okay. You would kick that motherfucker's ass if you had the opportunity to.
You would absolutely not be okay with that.
Or if your daughter called you and she was like, oh, my husband I found out that he was fucking another woman in our bed yesterday. You wouldn't be like, well, listen, daughter, is he a high value man? That's just what you have to tolerate. Like, bullshit. You would never be okay with that.
That would never happen.
No shot.
And those are the conversations. So Lila Rose actually brought up that point to Jay Weiler. And his response was, I'm not going to simp for my daughters. I am going to be who I'm going to be.
If you're not going to simp for anybody, it should probably be for your daughter, right? What do you mean?
Yeah. Like, how is that even an ideology that you attach to your children?
It reminds me of the, do you know what 4chan is?
Yeah.
It reminds me, there's an old 4chan copy pasta, and it's like, but it's like actually true now. But it's like it was like, if you really think about it, the ultimate cuck is being a father, because you spent 18 years raising an innocent daughter for another man to defile, and in a way, you're the biggest cuckold of them all. And it's like, people like actually believe this shit now. Like, you guys are insane.
That is so the ideology. When I heard him say that, like, I'm not gonna simp for my daughter, it's like, dude, how insecure can you be that like just showing affection, wanting something more for your daughter, like just admit that you're wrong here. Like, just take the L on that. It's the lifestyle that you choose. Another point, he's really my least favorite.
No. I saw a video of him caption like, this is how you become like a pussy sponge or something like that. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, could you imagine?
Which is so disingenuous, right? Because he's charging people money for this dating course. Meanwhile, he's like 6'4" with like the bone structure of Giga Chad. And it's like, God did that. Like, your magic treat to women is the fact that you're just built like that. Realistically, we're going to have a panel of women on tomorrow where we're going to discuss this. Like, women will go after guys because they're funny, because they smell good, because they're nice, because they make them feel special. That alone is enough to get a guy laid. And I've seen it with my own. I've seen overweight, short men broke that know how to have swag or are witty and are funny and still pick up chicks. So to me, it's so disingenuous for somebody that's like 6 foot something, perfect bone structure, built like that, to go out and be like, oh, I've got the trick to getting women. I've cracked the code. It's like, well, you didn't really do that.
I didn't even know. Like, I'm 5'8". I didn't know until I got to the internet, for instance, how obsessed men were with height. And you'll find these guys who are like, I've never gotten a girl before, but I think it's because I'm 5'10". And it's like, bro.
What?
Yeah.
You love short kings.
Yeah.
It'll be people that aren't even like that short. It'll be people that are like 5'11", that lie and say they're 6 foot. Like, oh, I don't think I'll
the reason
why.
And
I'm like, bro, that's not the reason why. Okay? Like,
let's go through some of these super chats. We got a funny one here. All right. So Diego Bravo's asking, appreciate not focusing on the boring bullshit arguments. Also being Puerto Rican, we dance with everybody for every single party together. Totally normal. Yeah, it's so bizarre that this is even like news that's circulating right now, as if it was the biggest deal. And the fact that it really took up like 20 minutes of the whatever podcast. There's
been this obsession since the Redpill stuff, and probably a little bit earlier. People are like obsessed with like cuck hunting, and I don't know if it's because they fantasize about the stuff, so they project it on other people.
That's what we think.
But they are obsessed with like, that guy's getting cucked, he's getting cucked, there's a cuck right now. Oh, look at this. And it's like, bro, like, and people will like send me. They're like, people will DM me stuff. And they'll be like, I think right now there's like a juicy black cock that's fucking your wife. I'm like, bro, I feel like you're thinking about this way too much.
That's exactly what
pictures and shit of it. I'm like, bro, you're obsessed.
And they want details. You go on these podcasts and they're like, cool, so tell me more
about your sex life and everything. It's like, bro, what the
fucking weird, dude. You guys just got on here. Can you say hello? Can you let them have a conversation? That's still a married couple with a private life. It's just so
Jesus. I'm very far left, okay? And I believe in things like the patriarchy and systemic racism. Like, I think these are real things, but I think that the left goes fucking crazy. Okay. Like, a guy won't hold the door open for a woman and she'll be like, this is the patriarchy and I'm getting raped right now. Right. Or they'll be like, a black person gets like a bad look from a white person and they'll be like, this is systemic racism and I bet that guy's going to get me fired from a job 20 years now. So like, for instance, like some of the recent stuff, did you watch any of the city bike stuff?
Yes. I know you were getting some shit for it. I saw it on Twitter.
So these types of circumstances drive me fucking crazy, because as soon as skin color gets involved, people's brains shut the off immediately, right? Like, I'm hearing people say like, it's like 5 adult men and 1 woman on a bike, and people are like, oh, why is she acting so afraid? And it's like, these are the same people that if you talk about like rape culture, they'll say like, well, if one woman is in a bar and there's a guy looking at her weird, she's got to be afraid for her fucking life because any guy could attack her at any time. But now there's like a 6-month fucking nurse on a bike, and it's like, well, why is she afraid? It's just 5 guys. They're being so friendly to her. And I'm like, but because it's like, and then also again, I hate to do this because it's an old conservative calling card, but if you swap the races, if it was 5 white dudes and 1 black woman on a bike, the response would be exactly the opposite. And it happened in the fucking train thing where people like the white nationalist Marine killed the poor innocent black guy. And it's like this, like the obsession with the racial shit is
Do you think that's organic, or do you think that that's something that perpetuated by like the media?
No, I think it's organic. I think that people hear it all their lives and they become conditioned to look for it. And once you hear it so much, it robs your ability to see anything beyond that. Like, if people tell you your whole life that America's the most racist country in the world and everybody's systemically racist and everybody's individually racist and everybody's individually sexist, well, then of course you're going to view the lens, like the lens you're going to use to view every single interaction is going to look like that. And that's,
Do you think there was like a hyper focus on that over the last couple of years, though, that might have heightened racial tensions in the country?
Personally think that COVID ruined everybody's brains. I think that normally we progress like culturally to some extent, but we're also like working and doing other shit. And when the lockdowns happen, we all went into and do you know what Dragon Ball Z is?
Yes.
Do you know what the hyperbolic time chamber is?
No, but
it's where they go to train for like 1 day, it becomes like a whole year.
Okay.
I think that happened with COVID. We like massively accelerated into crazy spaces where people had like a year's worth of time to stay at home and get politically fucking crazy. Yeah. And COVID I think that the BLM riots, people were bored as fuck. They all went out and they,
wanted to fuck shit up.
Got hype and shit.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happened.
Were you actually scared of COVID? Did you lock down yourself?
Yeah, initially, I was. But
wore the mask and everything.
I wore the mask in my car when I was driving around. I thought
you're not that guy.
I was that. Well, like in the first few days, yeah.
Get
because
out.
you got to be.
In fairness, I was too. Though the first day,
the first day was scary. Well, also because I don't know if were you guys here in Florida?
Yes.
Okay. The scariest moment of my entire life. Have you guys ever been in a tornado before?
No.
Yes,
We've been in hurricanes.
I have.
I live in Nebraska. Tornadoes are very weird because what will happen is a huge thunderstorm,
nowhere, right?
lightning, hail and everything. And then before you get to the wall cloud, that doesn't produce any rain. So the wind dies down, the rain is gone, and it's just a very eerie silence.
Kind of like the eye of a hurricane.
Yes. So in California, as soon as the lockdown started, as soon as COVID and all that shit was announced, driving up and down the 405 or the 5 and having there be no traffic was actually a very scary. I felt like I was in a zombie movie because in California, in LA, these freeways are never free.
Never full. I lived in Culver City for a few years. So
I lived in Culver City. When it was happening. And on all of those streets being empty, it felt like a zombie. So I had my mask on. I didn't know if motherfuckers were about to turn into zombies around me. So I had to drop dead.
In fairness, that was my idea. The first day, I remember I had gotten like a little like cough. I was like, oh my God, I got the COVID. And I remember trying to find a testing station. I went with like mask and like goggles and like honestly.
Get out of here. I was against it from day one. I knew
it was technically within that first week. And then of course, there I go with my little tin hat on, right? I start driving around and I'm like, I can't find a place. I think this is a setup. This can't be real. Why can't I find anywhere to test? And then,
I will say, I don't want to accuse anybody of faking or lying about anything, but I do think it's funny that apparently every progressive that got COVID also has long COVID. And every conservative that got the vaccine seems to have myocarditis. I think it's funny how people are picking and choosing the diseases and ailments they're getting based on their political affiliation. But
it seems like everything back to the point that you just made about 2020. Something happened in 2020 where like the smallest conversation turned into politics.
Everything. You could be talking to a random person at the store like, what do you think about Leah Thomas?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm like a 39-year-old child. I don't know what the fuck we're talking about.
I did. Going into the trans stuff, we did see a clip of you, and we'll get back to these super chats in a little bit. We saw a clip of you going after Matt Walsh because Matt Walsh, we agree, whereas we're not. I don't know. We're not against trans. We're not pro-trans, but we don't agree with the whole trans ideology.
We're more against the trans movement targeting children
and women and taking women's spaces.
Taking women's spaces. It's really where it's at.
But we're not Daily Wire fans. We're not Ben Shapiro fans. We're not Matt Walsh fans, and we wholeheartedly hate the fact that they're obsessed with the trans stuff. Like
the Republican Party right now, there's a lot of it's like all trans.
It's obsessive.
Shit,
It's obsessive.
But I think that has a lot to do with the DeSantis campaign, and that he's running his entire campaign on that. And when you look at the Daily Wire, they're big supporters of Ron DeSantis, and will probably end up endorsing him now that he's announced his run. But we think it's cringe because realistically, I see more of Dylan Mulvaney from the Daily Wire than I do from liberals. Like I wouldn't even know that Dylan Mulvaney existed if it wasn't because of the obsessive.
We had to turn off. We had to mute all of the Daily Wire hosts because I would open up YouTube and it was like Brett Cooper, Candace Owens, Ben Shapiro, Mike, literally like it was like obsessive. But tell us your thoughts more on like the children's stuff that you were arguing against Matt Walsh.
The issue that I have is when I start arguing with people, when we argue about things in society, it's a really good idea to have a general scope of the problem. That's really important because I think having an understanding of the scope of the problem should give you a better foundation to build your emotional response off of. So, and it's a good testing ground for a lot of people. So for instance, if you ask like a progressive, like how many unarmed black men do you think are killed every year by the cops? Like a lot of them will give you a number like, I don't know, 1,000, 5,000. And the answer is like, it's like 17. Right. And now let's say that let's say that we run with that. Let's say, okay, it's 1,000. Do you think that's okay that 3 black men a day, like how many police officers are in the country? Like, oh, I don't know. It's like, what if it's 1,000 police officers? Well, that'd be pretty bad because that means that like one police officer what if it's 10,000? What if it's 100,000 cops, right? But if you don't know any of these numbers, right? Let's say that I tell you, I think it's about 500,000 officers. Let's say 1,000 black men are dead. And you're like, is that pretty bad? And like, yeah, that's pretty bad. Okay. What if I tell you the number is actually 100? Did that become 90% less bad for you in your feelings? It's like, okay, I guess, what if I tell you it's actually like 10? And it's like, well, is it even a deal at all at that point, right? But the emotional response never fluctuates based on the reality. Numbers, it's based on the clips in front of you. And we're a country of 330 million people. I could do a clip of fucking anything. I could probably find videos of an Orthodox Jew guy killing an Asian woman in fucking some random city, right? But it doesn't mean there's a problem with it. I think that we consume a lot of media and it fucks our brains, and then we have like a really bad time getting a scope of the problem. So when we talk about the trans stuff, when somebody asks Matt Walsh, how many kids do you think are on HRT? And he's like, oh, I don't know. It's probably millions. Okay, my son is 12 years old. That's a scary fucking number. Okay, I'm a really progressive parent, but like millions of kids on HRT, I would be afraid if I heard that shit. The answer is like, I think it was like over a 5-year period, it was like 4,000 kids or something, or 5,000 kids. Right. Okay. Now, not to say that that's good or bad. I'm not judging if you are okay with it or not okay with it, but the scope is like, that's like
considering
4 orders of magnitude.
Cycle, right.
That's like 3 or 4 orders of magnitude of a difference. You just did a documentary on trans stuff. How are you off by that much? That would be like me talking to a liberal who's in favor of gun control, right? And you can always ask him, you're really upset about AR-15s. How many people do you think die from rifles a year? Nobody has any idea. The answer is like 300, right? But if you think the number is like 100,000 or 200,000 or 500,000, then yeah, of course.
Right.
Yeah. But that's basically.
So are you pro socially and chemically transitioning kids as young as like 12, like your son?
I think if you want to socially transition at any age, knock yourself out. Here's the scariest thing for me right now. So I think that trans people are real. Because it seems like throughout history.
What does that mean?
Some people's brains just seem to be wired for the opposite sex.
Okay.
I don't know why. I don't know how. I don't know if it happens during development or what. That seems to be the case. And it seems like there's no amount of talking them out of it. No amount of therapy will do it. So, but I think the issue that we're having is we need to spend a lot of time figuring out how to accurately identify these people, because trans stuff, we need to treat it like a medical thing and like a sexuality. It can't be like a aesthetic, because what's happening is it's like trans and LGBT stuff have become like an aesthetic, and aesthetics are cool and young kids are going to wear them. And then you get like all these girls it's identifying
like
as
containment.
Yeah, sure. If you want to say that. Yeah. So now you got like 20% of like girls want to be like non-binary Zers. And it's like, well, what are we even talking about now?
That's a quality take, because it's, it's very similar to what we believe, where, ideally what I'd like to see is before you start transitioning children physically at such a young age, if we're going to go down that road and you're trying to truly take care of the mental health of this child, then why not prepare them for that transition when they get to an age where they're old enough to make that kind of decision for themselves? A lot of the times these children will change their mind by the time that they turn 18, 19 years old. Right?
Sure. So I wish the conversation was focused more on like, we have to figure out how to accurately identify them. It seems like conservatives want to shut it down completely. Progressives want everybody to fucking transition at 4 years old. There has to be like some middle ground where it's like, let's focus on continuing to do research, figure out if you can identify them at an early age. If you can, then put them on whatever puberty blockers you want, but it can't just be this blanket, like affirming care, affirm everybody, validation for everybody, and like no critical analysis of any of the issues.
What about the surgeries?
I haven't heard a compelling reason to do surgeries before 18. I think surgery should probably wait until you're at least an adult. Yeah.
What about the adults who have detransitioned?
What about them?
What do you don't think that perhaps the doctors are actually committing some sort of like crimes against humanity? Or
I mean, if you're an adult and you decide to do the surgery and you decide to undo it later, some women get implants, some women take them out, some women get BBLs and they die. I mean, I think that if you've got a compelling reason to do it and you're an adult and you choose to do it, it should be your right to do it. But